I remember the day the doctor told me I had late-stage lung cancer. The words didn't sound real at first. I thought I must have misheard, or perhaps my mind refused to grasp what was being said. "You have about 3 months left," he said, his voice even, clinical. It felt like a cruel joke whispered in a room too quiet. I sat there, frozen. My husband, Mark, was beside me, holding my hand tightly. His grip was desperate, trembling almost, and I could see the fear in his eyes, the kind of fear that makes your chest ache. He didn't say anything, but I knew his mind was racing, imagining the days ahead. That night was the hardest night of my life. Mark didn't sleep a wink. He stayed awake, holding me so close I could hardly breathe, tears streaming down his face as if he was the one dying. I lay beside him, feeling numb, disconnected from my own body, as if watching someone else's tragedy unfold. The doctors had given me a timeline, 90 days to live. 90 days to say goodbye. But that night, wrapped in Mark's arms, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let this be the end of my story. There had to be more. The next morning, Mark made a decision that shocked me. He sold the company he had spent over a decade building, a technology startup that was more than just a business to him. It was his pride, his life's work, to his longtime partner, Derek, for far less than it's worth. "Emily," he said softly, looking into my eyes with a tenderness I hadn't seen before, "I want to spend whatever time we have left seeing the world with you. I want to show you all the places you've ever dreamed of." It was the kind of romantic gesture you see in movies, impulsive, beautiful, heartbreaking. So, we packed our bags and left behind the life we knew. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. We flew from New York to Paris, then to Rome, Barcelona, and beyond. Mark spared no expense, booking the best hotels, tasting every local delicacy, and filling every moment with laughter and stories. But even in the midst of the magic, a shadow hung over me. I was supposed to be dying. And yet, day by day, I felt a strange sense of returning strength. My breath came easier, my energy began to rebuild. The fatigue that once weighed me down lifted slowly like a fog burning off in the morning sun. At times, I felt guilty for feeling better. Was I betraying the diagnosis? Was I denying the reality I was told to accept? Mark never questioned it. He kept a small white pill by my side, telling me it was experimental treatment from Switzerland, the last hope. I swallowed them faithfully, the tiny capsules a symbol of both fear and hope. But hope has a way of complicating things. One afternoon, while organizing files on Mark's laptop, I stumbled upon something I wasn't meant to see. An email thread. A conversation between Mark and Derek that made my blood run cold. The diagnosis was fake. They had fabricated everything, the medical reports, the prognosis, the entire narrative that had shattered my world. And the pills? Just vitamins mixed with sedatives. I sat there, frozen, my fingers numb, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. The man I loved, the man who had held me when I was broken, had been part of a conspiracy that tried to steal my life, and my company. That night, as Mark lay beside me, I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of betrayal settle deep in my bones. I wasn't just fighting cancer anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, my sanity, my future. The day we left our home behind felt surreal. I still recall the sterile smell of hospital rooms lingering in my mind, the cold, impersonal walls where the words 3 months left had echoed like a death sentence. Packing was mechanical, emotionless at first, folding clothes, checking passports, arranging medications. But beneath all that, there was a trembling hope. A fragile thread I clung to. Mark's hand found mine at the airport. His fingers, warm but shaky, squeezed gently. In that silent moment, without words, we both understood that this trip wasn't just about travel. It was about defying the cruel ticking clock, about grabbing whatever time we had left, and making it count. Paris was our first stop. The city was vibrant, alive with the colors of blooming gardens and the murmur of cafes filled with strangers laughing and talking in soft French accents. I felt a strange contrast, surrounded by life and beauty, yet carrying the shadow of my diagnosis like a hidden weight. Mark's joy in showing me the city was infectious. We wandered the cobbled streets, stood beneath the Eiffel Tower's iron latticework, and sat watching the sunset by the Seine. I remember him whispering, "One day, you'll climb that tower with me." A simple promise, but one that stirred something deep inside me, a spark of hope. Yet, in the quiet moments, my body reminded me of the diagnosis. Fatigue would wash over me, my breaths coming in shallow gasps. But slowly, mysteriously, the exhaustion began to lift. Day by day, I felt lighter, stronger. The fog of sickness seemed to thin, and I was able to walk farther, talk longer, and dream again. One evening in Rome, we sat at a small trattoria, the air fragrant with garlic and fresh basil. I tried to savor the meal, but a cough escaped suddenly, sharp and persistent. A drop of blood caught in my mouth, and the color terrified Mark. His calm facade cracked for the first time since our journey began. He insisted on taking me to a private clinic. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes but cautious voice, ordered tests I barely understood. When she spoke again, her English was careful. "Are you certain these scans are yours?" Confusion knit her brow. The report came back soon after. No cancer. No tumor. Just a bad case of pneumonia and severe fatigue. I remember Mark's relief, his smile forced, but real. I wanted to believe it was a miracle. But a quiet voice inside whispered caution. That night, sleep eluded me. I found Mark on the balcony, the city lights sparkling beneath him like a sky full of distant stars. His phone was pressed tight to his ear, voice low and urgent. "What do you mean the meds were only supposed to work for 6 months?" "It's been 3, he said, his tone clipped, anxious. "I'll double the dosage." "She can't find out." "Not yet." I froze, heart pounding in a rhythm of shock and disbelief. Mark's eyes met mine as he ended the call. Panic flashed for a moment before he masked it with a tight smile. "You're up early," he said, stepping inside. "Just couldn't sleep," I replied, voice steady though my mind raced. In that instant, everything changed. I realized the diagnosis was a lie. The pills, the prognosis, all a carefully crafted fiction. The man I loved, who had promised to share my final days, was part of a plan to deceive me. Yet I refused to crumble. Over the following weeks, I lived 2 lives. Outwardly, I was the fragile woman slowly regaining strength. I let Mark care for me, watched the world from hotel balconies, enjoyed moments of sun and laughter. But beneath the surface, I was quietly gathering pieces of truth. I searched Mark's laptop when he wasn't around, capturing emails that detailed plans to falsify medical reports and financial documents. I recorded snippets of phone calls where his voice hardened when discussing the company shares I was coerced to transfer. Mark's paranoia grew. He became increasingly secretive, his late-night whispers and furtive glances betraying his guilt. Yet, he never suspected how carefully I played my role. I began tampering with my medication, having doses, skipping days, watching my body's reaction. Nothing changed. In fact, I felt stronger. Our journey continued, Tokyo, Sydney, Cape Town, each city a backdrop to my secret fight. The world was breathtaking, vibrant, full of possibility. It reminded me that life isn't measured in months or years but in moments, moments of courage, of choice, of reclaiming oneself. I wrote quietly in my journal, chronicling the days, the feelings, the small victories. My pain, my hope, my anger. I had become more than a patient. I was a woman awakening, readying for a battle that went far beyond illness. One evening in Sydney, Mark and I sat by the harbour, the opera house glowing softly in the twilight. He reached for my hand, his touch hesitant. "Emily," he said, "I want you to know I love you. I never meant to hurt you." I looked into his eyes, the man who had been both my protector and my betrayer. "I know," I whispered. "But love doesn't justify lies." That night, I promised myself I wouldn't be a victim of their deception. Behind every beautiful sunrise and every shared smile was a quiet war within me, the struggle to hold on to my truth, to build my strength, to prepare for what was coming. Because now I knew, this journey wasn't just about escaping death. It was about reclaiming life. The hotel room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn but never fully closed, as if reluctant to hide the truth that was about to come to light. Outside, the city hummed quietly, unaware of the storm that raged in my heart. For days, the nagging suspicion gnawed at me. That email I stumbled upon, those hushed phone calls, all hints pointing toward a secret far darker than I dared imagine. I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every interaction, every moment of Mark's behavior since the diagnosis. The late-night whispers, the frantic glances, the guarded phone conversations. I knew I had to find the truth. Not just for myself, but for the life I thought was mine. Sitting at the small desk in our room, I opened Mark's laptop again. The password was easy, our wedding anniversary. How cruel, I thought bitterly, that something so personal was the key to unraveling his deception. Emails flooded the screen, a cold digital trail of betrayal. Mark and Derek's correspondence revealed a chilling plot, forged medical reports, falsified test results, coordinated lies to convince me I was dying. My hands trembled as I scrolled further. They had arranged for a doctor, someone with no real credentials, to provide fake reports. The pills Mark gave me? Vitamin supplements mixed with sedatives, meant to dull my awareness, to keep me compliant. My heart pounded in my chest. The man I trusted, the man I loved, had been lying to me every step of the way. I sat back, the chair creaking beneath me, and let the shock wash over me. I wanted to scream, to run, to collapse, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was my moment to gather strength. I printed every email, every document. I recorded conversations when I could, all without Mark knowing. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the fortress I was building around myself. Mark's world was crumbling, even if he didn't realize it yet. The next day, we wandered through the streets of Rome. The city's ancient stones seemed to whisper stories of endurance and survival. I tried to lose myself in its beauty, but my mind was elsewhere. When I looked at Mark, I saw a man struggling to maintain his facade. The carefree traveler was gone, replaced by someone tense, haunted. One evening, over dinner, I tried to speak gently. "Mark, why did you do it? Why lie about my illness?" He avoided my eyes, his voice quiet. "It was for us, for the company, for our future." But I wasn't buying his excuses anymore. I reached out to a lawyer, a woman named Alexine Rivers, who specialized in cases like mine. She didn't judge or offer empty comfort. Instead, she listened carefully as I recounted everything, the emails, the forged reports, the pills. "You have a strong case," she said. "But we need original medical records and proof of the fake diagnosis." I nodded, determination flooding me. This was bigger than me now. It was about justice. Mark became suspicious. He watched me more closely, questioned me more often. But I was careful, still playing the part of the fragile patient. It was a dangerous game, but one I had to win. At night, I lay awake listening to him pacing the room, the tension thick between us. Yet, with every secret he tried to hide, I grew stronger. One afternoon, I met the fake doctor. The man was cold, distant, his white coat a thin veil over his deceit. He denied any involvement in diagnosis, claiming he only managed the medication that didn't exist. I saw through the act. I recorded everything. Back with Alexine, we pieced together the final puzzle. The moment of truth was coming. This chapter of my life was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming my story. The days that followed the discovery of the lie felt like walking through a fog, thick, confusing, and disorienting. The man I thought I knew was now a stranger wearing a mask of deceit. Yet, I couldn't let myself react in anger or confrontation just yet. To protect myself and build my case, I had to become an expert actor in my own life. Mark believed I was fragile, a woman with a ticking clock, fragile and compliant. I decided to keep it that way. I wore the mask of weakness so well that even he forgot I was still watching, still fighting. Each morning, I woke early and took my medication, the pills he handed me so carefully. But I secretly began having dozes, skipping days. The physical strength that had returned did not wane. In fact, I felt sharper, clearer, stronger. My mind was no longer clouded by sedatives but sharpened by purpose. Mark's behavior became increasingly erratic. He grew suspicious of my health improvements, of my growing alertness. There were nights when I caught him staring at my pill bottle, counting them as if fearing I would discover the truth. The more I played the part of the ailing wife, the more he lowered his guard. One night, I overheard him talking on the phone in a hushed, tense voice. "She can't find out. Not now. If she does, everything falls apart." My heart hammered in my chest. The stakes were higher than I imagined. I felt the weight of the secret I carried, not just my own survival, but the unraveling of a conspiracy built on lies and greed. I watched Mark closely, learning his patterns, listening for cracks in his calm. His phone calls became more frequent, more frantic. He paced the room late into the night, his brow furrowed with worry. There were moments when his eyes met mine across a crowded room, and I could see the conflict deep inside, guilt, fear, and perhaps a trace of regret. But regret was meaningless without redemption. I knew I had to stay strong. The small town where we stayed was quiet. The locals knew nothing of the drama unfolding inside our rented apartment. To them, I was simply a woman on a journey with her husband. But behind closed doors, a battle was raging. I made plans with Alexine, gathering documents, preparing for the day I would expose the truth. We mapped out strategies, identified key witnesses, and arranged for forensic experts to analyze handwriting samples and forged documents. I couldn't let the fear consume me. Every smile I gave Mark, every tender moment I faked, was a step toward my freedom. One afternoon, I confronted Mark gently during a walk along the river. "Mark," I said quietly, "how did I get better so fast? That medicine you gave me, it can't be that effective, can it?" He hesitated, his face tightening. "The doctor I hired is a specialist," he replied carefully. "He designed a treatment plan just for you. Not everyone understands it." I nodded slowly, keeping my tone light. "Could we see him? I'd like a second opinion. Just to be sure." He looked away, uncomfortable. "I'll see what I can do," he muttered. That night, I searched for more evidence on his laptop. A flash drive appeared mysteriously on the desk. Mark said it contained old business files, but when I plugged it in, I found emails discussing fake medical reports and fraudulent transfers. I felt sick, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was the moment to gather proof, not emotions. I documented everything. Mark's attempts to control me grew desperate. He asked more questions, watched me more closely. I kept pretending. Behind my composed facade, a fire burned. A fire to reclaim my life. To hold on to the truth. To win. The weight of months of quiet suspicion, cold silences, and stolen moments, finally culminated in that room, where truth and betrayal faced each other head-on. I remember the morning clearly. The air outside was crisp with the early chill of autumn, but inside, the space felt thick with tension. Mark and I sat across from each other, the gulf between us no longer invisible. There was no warmth, no familiarity left, only the harsh reality of what had been done. For so long, I had lived with a secret burning inside me. The knowledge that the man I had trusted, the man who once held me tenderly in the darkest nights, had conspired to rob me of my life and dignity. That this journey we took, the medicines I swallowed, the tears he shed, it was all part of a cruel fabrication. But I was no longer the frightened woman who had clung to him for hope. That woman had been replaced by one forged in fire and resolve. I took a deep breath and looked him in the eye. "I know everything," I said, my voice steady but full of the years of pain I carried. "The diagnosis was fake. The doctor you hired doesn't exist. The pills were nothing but vitamins mixed with sedatives. And you and Derek planned it all, to take away my shares, to steal everything I have. For a moment, his eyes darted away, searching for an escape from the truth. But there was nowhere to hide. "Emily, it wasn't supposed to be like this," he said, voice trembling. "I thought I was protecting you, protecting us." His words fell flat. There was no protection in lies, no safety in betrayal. "I trusted you," I whispered, "and you broke that trust in the worst way possible." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I had prepared, the emails between him and Derek, the forged medical reports, the signed transfer papers, evidence cold and undeniable. I laid the documents before him, watching as the color drained from his face. His jaw tightened, lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, but I was beyond fear. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said firmly. "I'm fighting back. For my company, for my future. For myself." The weeks that followed were a blur of legal preparation. I met with Alexine regularly, discussing every detail, planning every move. She was my anchor, calm, pragmatic, fierce. Together, we gathered more evidence, interviewed witnesses, and prepared to bring the truth to light. Mark tried to stall, to negotiate, to buy silence with promises and threats. But I would not be deterred. This was my fight, and I was prepared to see it through to the end. On the day of the court hearing, the tension was palpable. The courtroom was cold and austere, the walls seemingly echoing every whispered lie and every shouted truth. I sat at the plaintiff's table, Alexine beside me, stacks of documents between us. Mark entered with a confidence that belied the turmoil inside. His lawyer was aggressive, challenging every piece of evidence, questioning every witness. But truth has a way of shining through darkness. Derek was called to the stand. The man who had once been arrogant and dismissive now spoke quietly, his words weighed down by guilt. He admitted to the scheme, the forged diagnosis, the falsified contracts, the secret transfer of shares. The forensic expert testified about the forged signatures on my life insurance policy and company transfer documents. The judge listened intently, her expression stern. Mark's defense crumbled piece by piece. I felt a strange calm wash over me as the layers of deception were peeled back. This was justice, slow, deliberate, unyielding. Outside the courthouse, the world seemed lighter, as if the burden of betrayal had been lifted from my shoulders. Mark was no longer the man I once loved, but I was free. I reclaimed my company, my assets, and most importantly, my voice. The scars remained, but they were a testament to survival. As I walked away from that courtroom, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman reborn. The courtroom felt like a battlefield, cold and unforgiving. Every word spoken was a weapon, every glance, a tactical maneuver. I sat with Alexine by my side, clutching a folder thick with evidence, the culmination of months of painstaking work, a carefully constructed case against the man who had betrayed me. Mark's presence on the other side was both familiar and alien. He was a ghost of the husband I once knew, hardened now by desperation and fear. His legal team was formidable, armed with every trick to stall, confuse, and undermine the truth. But I had spent too long preparing for this moment to be shaken. Opening statements. The judge called the court to order. The prosecutor's voice cut through the silence, outlining the charges with clarity: fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and theft. Each accusation was backed by evidence painstakingly gathered and presented. When it was my turn to speak, I did not raise my voice or plead for sympathy. Instead, I told my story simply and honestly. I spoke of trust broken, of a life nearly stolen, and of the strength it took to stand and fight. I was told I was dying, I said. And because I believed it, I gave away my company, my future. But I am still here. And I am here to reclaim what is mine. The evidence. One by one, pieces of evidence were entered into the record. Emails between Mark and Derek, with cold, calculated plans to fake my illness and seize control of my assets. Forged medical records, expertly crafted to deceive not just me, but the medical system itself. The forensic analyst presented their findings, demonstrating beyond reasonable doubt that the signatures on critical documents had been forged. The handwriting, the pressure points, the flow, all inconsistent with mine. 2 key audio recordings were played in court, one where Derek admitted his role in the conspiracy, and another where Mark discussed how to maintain the lie, even as my health unexpectedly improved. The courtroom was silent but charged with tension. Each piece chipped away at the facade Mark had built. Witness testimony. Derek took the stand, no longer the confident, arrogant man I had first met. His voice was flat and resigned as he recounted the details of the fraud. He confirmed that Mark was the mastermind behind the scheme and that he had merely followed orders. When Mark's lawyer tried to discredit Derek's testimony, the judge was firm, allowing the evidence as critical to the case. Medical experts testified to the impossibility of my initial diagnosis, explaining how the fabricated records were inconsistent with the tests and symptoms I presented. Cross-examination. Mark took the stand, a stark contrast to the confident man from our past. His answers were guarded, evasive, and at times contradictory. His lawyer attempted to portray me as unstable, manipulated by grief and shock, but the evidence and testimonies held strong. When asked about the forged documents, Mark claimed ignorance, blaming Derek and others. But his own emails, filled with detailed instructions, contradicted his claims. The judge's reaction. Throughout the trial, the judge remained composed but stern. Her questions during proceedings reflected skepticism towards Mark's defenses. In a quiet moment during a break, Alexine whispered, "We're breaking through. The truth is shining." The verdict approaches. As the trial neared its conclusion, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. This was not just a legal battle but a reclaiming of my life. The courtroom had become a place where my pain, my strength, and my truth converged. Closing arguments. Alexine delivered the closing argument with precision and passion. She spoke not just to the facts but to the heart of the matter: betrayal, manipulation, and the courage it takes to fight back. Mark's lawyer tried a final attempt to sow doubt, but it fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. Verdict day. The day the verdict was announced, the courtroom was packed. Friends, family, and strangers had come to witness justice. When the judge read the decision, guilty on multiple counts, ordered to pay restitution and face prison time, a wave of emotion swept over me. It wasn't triumph or joy. It was peace. Peace in knowing that justice had been served. Peace in reclaiming my power. Aftermath. The legal battle had ended, but my journey was far from over. I had reclaimed my company and my life, but healing would take time. I spent months rebuilding, personally and professionally. The scars remained, but they were badges of resilience. Mark disappeared from my life, a shadow of his former self, facing the consequences of his actions. Reflection. Sitting in my office one quiet morning, I looked out over the city skyline. The journey from despair to justice had changed me. I was no longer defined by sickness or betrayal. I was a woman who had fought for herself and won. The verdict had come and gone. Mark was sentenced, his freedom stripped away, his empire dismantled piece by piece. Derek faded into obscurity, his reputation ruined, his influence gone. But for me, the real journey was just beginning. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt an overwhelming mixture of relief, exhaustion, and a quiet, simmering hope. The fight was over, but my life was far from back to normal. I had survived betrayal, deception, and the cruelest form of loss, but now I had to rebuild. The first few days back in our home were surreal. The familiar walls, once a place of comfort, now felt foreign. Each room echoed memories of what had been: love, lies, laughter, and tears. I moved through the space carefully, touching the things Mark had left behind, trying to reconcile the past with the future. I began by reclaiming control of my finances. With Alexine's help, every joint account was closed. The money Mark had hidden away was frozen, placed under court supervision. I learned to navigate the world of asset recovery, a daunting but necessary task. It was tedious, frustrating, but it was mine. Professionally, the company had suffered, but its core remained intact. Loyal employees reached out, offering support and dedication. They saw me not just as a leader, but as a survivor. Slowly, I started to rebuild the business, making decisions with a new clarity and strength. I registered a new company, R41. The name held meaning only I understood, R for Rachel, and 41 for the lowest body temperature I had dropped when I was at my weakest, a number that had once symbolized death but now symbolized survival. Emotionally, the road was rocky. The pain of betrayal ran deep. Trust, once broken, was hard to restore, not just with others, but within myself. I sought therapy, finding a space where I could untangle the knots of grief, anger, and fear. Friends and family became anchors. Their support reminded me that I was not alone, that healing was a process, not a destination. I refused to let bitterness consume me. Instead, I chose to channel my energy into growth. I learned to set boundaries, to recognize red flags, to trust my instincts. Every contract I signed, every partnership I entered into, was scrutinized with a new vigilance. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the quiet, memories flooded in, the gentle touch of Mark's hands, the whispered lies, the moments I had almost given up. But with dawn came renewed strength. I found solace in small rituals, morning coffee on the balcony, journaling, long walks in the park. These moments grounded me, connected me back to myself. One afternoon, sitting in a cafe, I watched a woman across the room. She was older, her face lined with experience and resilience. I saw myself in her, a woman who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. That's when I realized my story was no longer defined by Mark or the lies. It was mine, a story of survival, strength, and rebirth. I began speaking at events, sharing my journey not as a tale of victimhood but as a beacon of empowerment. Women approached me afterward, thanking me for giving voice to their own silent struggles. The company grew, but more importantly, I grew. I rebuilt not just a business, but a life, one rooted in authenticity, courage, and self-respect. The scars remained, yes. But they were reminders of battles won, not wounds still bleeding. I no longer feared the past because I was no longer a prisoner to it. As the sun set over the city skyline one evening, I felt a quiet peace. The journey from darkness to light had been long and painful, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, I looked forward to tomorrow. After the storm, when the dust had settled, I found myself standing in the quiet aftermath, not in defeat, but in newfound strength. The journey I had endured was more than a battle for justice or survival, it was a profound transformation of the soul. I learned that true power does not come from others recognizing your strength. It comes from the quiet, daily choices to keep moving forward, to reclaim your narrative, and to live on your own terms. The weight of words. For a long time, I feared words like strong or brave. They felt hollow, labels that others placed on me to make themselves feel better. But I knew my story was more complex. Strength was not about the moments I stood tall and unwavering. It was in the tears I shed in silence, in the nights I wrestled with doubt, and in the moments I chose forgiveness, not for others, but for myself. I began to write again, pouring my thoughts into journals and letters I would never send. Writing helped me untangle the pain, the confusion, and the anger. It became a sacred act of reclaiming my voice. Redefining trust. One of the hardest lessons was learning to trust again, not blindly, but wisely. Trusting myself first. I learned to listen to my instincts, to question intentions without cynicism, and to build boundaries that protected my heart and mind. Every contract I signed, every relationship I nurtured, was now filtered through a lens of experience and care. A new identity. The woman who emerged from this journey was not the same as the one who first heard those devastating words. I was more than a diagnosis. More than a victim. More than a wife betrayed. I was a survivor, a warrior, an architect of my own destiny. This new identity wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, resilient, and unwavering. Living fully. I stopped counting the days, the months, the years. Instead, I counted moments, moments of laughter, of peace, of connection. I traveled again, but this time on my own terms. I found joy in the small things, a sunrise, a good book, a conversation that touched my soul. Life was no longer a countdown. It was a gift to be unwrapped each morning with gratitude. Giving back. My experience opened a door to purpose beyond myself. I began volunteering with organizations that support women facing betrayal, illness, and loss. I shared my story, not for sympathy, but to inspire strength. In the faces of those women, I saw reflections of my own pain and resilience. Together, we built a community of healing and empowerment. Lessons learned. No one else defines your worth. Healing is not linear, it's a journey with ups and downs. Strength is often silent, found in perseverance. Self-love is the foundation of all recovery. Closing affirmation. I don't need anyone to call me strong or brave anymore. Those words are empty without meaning behind them. What matters is this. My life is now written by me. Not by them. Not by my past. Only by me. I carry scars, yes. But they are part of my story, proof that I fought and endured. I am no longer bound by pain or betrayal. I am free. Looking ahead. As I sit here today, reflecting on the path I've traveled, I feel a deep sense of peace. I wake each morning with purpose. I face each day with courage. I have learned to trust life again. And I know this truth, the hardest battles often birth the strongest warriors.